So welcome everyone, especially to our IBS Women's Network members and supporters. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Katie Grund and I'm the IBS Portfolio Operations Lead based in Chicago. And I'm so excited today about our professional development workshop on communicating your value while doing everything else, of course. So this is great timing for us at Mondelēz, especially given our year-end performance review, self-assessments being due on the 13th. So what better way to spend our time than figuring out and how we can communicate our value a little bit better. So first, for all of you, I want to thank you for taking time to participate today. And, during our time of, being in the pandemic, and if you're in the US after a long election season, I'm glad to see so many people here willing to spend some time on yourselves and really doing that self-care and taking that time to focus on your accomplishments and the value that you bring to Mondelēz. I'm really also so grateful to the IBS Women's Network leadership team. And I know there's plenty of you on the call right now, as well as to Javier for investing in our development as women and as women leaders at Mondelēz. Their sponsorship and dedication to our Women's Network really highlights that each of us are important to the success, not only to IBS, but to our company as well. So I have a lot of passion on this topic. And when I think back to my development overall throughout my career, I used to have that mindset that, if I do a good job, my work's going to speak for itself. And luckily, I've had mentors along the way that helped me to improve my confidence at work and in other aspects of my life, and really to push me to articulate what my successes are. At one of my past employers at Aon, actually, I had the privilege of participating in a workshop, and I was so energized by that workshop and the actions that came out of it. And that workshop was actually led by and coached by Darcy Eikenberg. So while that was 4 or 5 years ago, I can still clearly remember some of the takeaways from that session and how Darcy's coaching style was so relatable, actionable, and really helped build my confidence so then I could be my best. So I hope today that that's something that we can do for you as well. So like many of us in the working world today, Darcy wears a lot of hats. She's an executive coach to leaders at companies such as Coca-Cola, Microsoft, State Farm, Deloitte Consulting, and many more. She consults and speaks on career growth, employee engagement, and leadership development all over the country. Plus, she's the author of Bring Your Superpowers to Work, and I think you could probably see her cape back there behind in her background too. So that's your guide to more clarity and confidence and control. And she also blogs regularly on leadership and career issues on her website and blog that's called redcaperevolution.com. So her ideas have been shared in Harvard Business Review, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, as well as Forbes, among others. And she's a former principal and communications consultant business leader at Hewitt Associates, which is now part of Aon. So Darcy brings a sense of humor to serious matters at work and career, and she offers simple, practical ways that we can change our lives to work for the better and for good. So please join me in welcoming Darcy Eikenberg.
Thank you, Katie, so much, and thank all of you who've joined us. Again, apologies for the little tech hiccup. One character can go a long way, right? But if you haven't had a chance yet to pop into the chat, look for all panelists and attendees and say hi, tell us where you're from. Love to hear from you. And throughout the conversation, please go ahead and put questions into the chat. We'll be using that more so than the Q&A, but also, here's the great thing that Katie and the team have arranged for you is that we'll also have a more deep dive Q&A session in December. So ask your questions now. We'll get to as many as we can. We'll still end on time because I know you have commitments and plans. But I want to be able to answer any of the questions that you have about this topic. So with that, let's just dive in. November, here we are. We are so close to the end of the year. right? Your performance reviews are almost due. The holidays are rolling around. They're going to look and feel different than they've ever done before, like pretty much everything else in our world today, right? And I don't know about you, but let's just be honest. 2020 has been a wild one. I mean, that's an understatement in so many ways. And a lot of my clients, as they think back on the year, but then as they're starting to look forward, like you are, they're asking themselves, where do we go now? What do we do next? But I got to tell you, you are somebody special because you are here right now. Right now, you've decided to show up today. And even after you had to go through a little bit of, click around to find what the right link was, you're here. And that is extra special because, quite honestly, you're not virtual. You're real. I'm real. Katie's real. Deb on my team, who's also on the line and is there to help us answer questions. You're real. Your teams are real. Just because, we're kind of hiding behind screens doesn't mean we're virtual. And because you're real, this is a great time to just take a look in that mirror and to find the real things that you actually have accomplished this year. And I want to just mirror this back to you before we dive in to some of the ways to communicate your value this year, because I would say that there is something you've done this year that you've learned, that you've accomplished, that you've grown. Anybody have one of those things out there? I bet you've done one or more of many of these things on this list. And one of the things that often I think we lose sight of in a crazy year like this, and even just in our busy day-to-day lives, is how far we've come. So let's take a minute and I want you to give yourself credit for one thing that you're proud of doing this year, or maybe you're proud of not doing. So tell us in the chat. There's also a space, if you downloaded the action sheet, there's also a place to kind of write that down. But take a second. What's the one thing that you're proud of doing or not doing? Let's give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back. So pop it right into the chat. And if you haven't had a chance to say hi in the chat, tell us who you are and where you're from. I would love to hear it. We'll use the chat for questions, and whereas I might not get to speak to every single person who shows up in the chat, we'll know you're here. And I love the fact that you're here from all over the world. Congratulations on spending that time today investing in you, because you could have said, oh, I have so many other things to do, but you didn't. You're here. And if you want to use the action plan, you can use it now, you can use it later, but it's here for you. If you didn't get it ahead of time, it's on redcaperevolution.com/MDLZ. And on that page as well, after we're done, there's lots of other resources where you can go deeper into any of the topics that I've talked about today, where you'd like to have a little bit more help. And you're welcome to share those resources with others. So I hope you'll check that out after our time today. But you are here, I think, at the perfect right time. And not the time when we got started, but the time in our world and in your company. Because I believe that now is the time when we need to speak up more and get heard and motivate progress and change. It's time for us to ask ourselves the question of, how do we resist, all of the busyness and the chatter and the noise? And how do we resist just doing and doing and doing without knowing that it's meaningful, that it makes a difference? And how do we take risks, calculated risks, but important risks that grow our department, that grow our companies, and grow our careers. So this is why I believe it's time for a revolution in how we understand, how we see, and we communicate our value. This is why I call my company Red Cape Revolution, because remember when you were a kid and you grabbed a towel or a sheet and you threw it around your shoulders and you felt confident, you felt in control. What if we could feel that way every single day at work? What would change in our lives at work then? What would change with our colleagues, with our teams, for our products, for our customers, our clients, our community? Well, I believe we can make these changes, and communicating our value and knowing it and believing it is at the core of it. And this isn't just about your career. I believe that the world needs the value you bring now more than ever. So I am so excited that you're here today. Again, if you're just joining us, please pop into the chat, say hi, tell us where you're from. I love that we're from all over the world. We have so much to learn from each other. And so the world needs us. Yes, we need to communicate our value for our careers, for our performance reviews that are coming up. Yes. What gets in the way? There are 3 myths that I see over and over again. And maybe one of them is something that you are using too. Number 1, Katie actually mentioned this in her introduction. My work will speak for itself. Well, when I hear somebody say this, the warning bells go off. Because when we let others define us, when we let others interpret what the work is, we become a commodity. And what do I mean by a commodity? Well, a commodity is simply something that is just like everything else. It's just like all the rest. You know, there was a time in our world where coffee was exactly the same in Detroit as it was in Denver. It was a commodity. And if you don't think that your profession, that your job could become a commodity, I'd like you to meet some of your friends in these fine professions, many of which who have been reduced to the lowest common denominator, that have become commodities. Your profession can become a commodity too, but you are not a commodity. So when you know and communicate your value, you can avoid this trap. You can avoid other people thinking they know what you do and thinking that, well, you know, we don't need someone at this level to do it. We'll reduce that. We'll not pay attention to that. You can avoid becoming a commodity. And I'm going to show you some ways how to do that today. The second myth that gets in the way is I'm just fill in the blank. I'm just an analyst. I'm just a business person. I'm just a marketer. Again, this makes me crazy. Because here's what I know. You have unique and special superpowers, even at times when you don't feel like it, because you're so close to your work. There's something you do, the way you do it, the resources you bring to it, the style you bring to it, the way you make decisions. All of that make up your superpowers. And these aren't just your strengths, but they are the way that you make the work you do matter. Now, what do we really mean by matter? Well, today, think about the people that you admire, the people that you follow, the things they are doing that is not on their job description that matters, often have to do with these basic human needs, things like connection or community or meaning, inspiration. Dare I even say it, this 4-letter word in our workplace, love. all of these things are needed now more than ever. So when we know the value we bring and when we communicate it, we get to do more of the work that matters in the ways that matter to those we care about. So the third myth, I don't have time. I'm so busy. Yes, we're all busy. There's lots of choices we can make, but here's the truth. Overwhelm, feeling too busy is not about time. We all have the same amount of time. It's about choices. It's about how you're making decisions. It's about where you focus based on your unique superpowers. So when we know our value, when we know how to communicate our value, it makes it easier to make better choices. And that way we create more time. So these are some of the myths that happen. So I'm curious for some of you, do any of these pop up for you? Did anybody default to some of these myths? Maybe there's something that you've said to yourself, I see a yes. Yeah, if so, tell me what, or jot it down. Again, you've got your action sheet if you're using it. If not, you can go back later and take a look at it. But we've got to blast these myths before I'm too young. That's a good one. That's a good one too. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm too fat. I'm too skinny, especially as women, right? And women leaders, we do this to ourselves all the time. So let's stop it. Let's understand our value and understand what's happening for us right now. Because in a time of great change, doors don't close, the windows actually open. You get to choose a different thought. If you are thinking I'm too young, what if this is my time? If you are thinking, well, the work will speak for itself, what an opportunity to learn how to speak for my work. So we're going to take advantage of this time of change. So why don't just take a quick sip of water before we move on and take any questions that are out here. So let's see, I don't see any questions. If you have a question anytime, pop it in the chat. If for some reason that I don't answer it now, I'll make sure we get it answered either in the Q&A that we're going to do in December, or we'll get an answer to you some other way. So, okay, I don't see any other questions, but I do see some Pride references. Proud dedicating personal time to help suicide survivors, promote mental health. That's awesome. Great, terrific. And as you see, guys, too, as we go along, we're going kind of quickly to be able to have a good conversation and share a lot of tools. But my assistant Deb is also popping in with some other links, some other things that if one of these ideas resonates with you, you can go check those out afterward. And again, they're all on that redcaperevolution.com/MDLZ page for you. All right, let's dig in to some of the meat of, yeah, it's great that the world needs me. Yeah, I can get over the myths, but how? What can I do? Well, today I've got 3 strategies for you to use to be able to see your value, communicate it, and through that, build your confidence so that you can build whatever you're trying to do in your work and in your life. So here's the first one. Get clear on your superpowers. Now, I mentioned the idea of superpowers before, and as you heard from Katie, my first book was called Bring Your Superpowers to Work. But often people think superpowers just is another cute name for strength. But there's so much more that you do in your work that's not just about your strength or about the knowledge that you have or the fact that you're a good project manager, or you know a certain technology. Chances are what makes you great is not on your job description at all. There is something else, and you know it. You know that there's something about how you do things, about the history that what you've gone through, about what you've learned. I had a client once who was a healthcare consultant, and she got breast cancer, and she went through all of the challenges and treatment and pain and that we go through when that's our journey. And she came out the other side as a survivor and proudly went back to work. But what she found is that the lessons she had learned during that time shifted her perspective on some of the work. She made different types of suggestions. She consulted in a different way. She didn't leave all of that personal learning behind. She brought her whole self to her work. It became part of her superpowers. There's probably something about you that's not on your job description. And often when we're thinking about our value, we want to bubble it up to something that creates money, that saves time or saves energy. In my client's situation, her having a bolder perspective about how she would consult, what she would say to clients, how she would interact with teammates, saved both energy and actually made money because she could stand out. She wasn't a commodity. She wasn't saying the same things everybody else was because her path and experience were unique to her. You have superpowers too. And one of the tools that you can use to work on, think about, develop your superpowers even more is what I call your who and do what statement. I'm going to run through this with you, and then I'm going to give you an example. So don't freak out if it's not immediately clear. And there's also links to this on the exclusive page for you all at Mondelēz. So your who and do what statement is I, and then we put in an action, an action verb and something that is in your superpower space. Then it's with people, process, and things so that there's a bigger result. The bigger result that matters, the bigger result that might save money, make money, save time, save energy. This is not an elevator speech. I'm not a big fan of the elevator speech. I don't want to talk to anybody in an elevator. And even if we were traveling in elevators right now, we'd have a mask on, so no one could understand us anyway. So the who and do what statement is a tool for you to get clear about what you really do and how you really add value, and in a way that helps you see it because you're too close to it. You think you're just the XYZ job, but no, you're something else. So here's an example. So as an example that we might typically think about ourselves, like I'm an analyst in the, ABC department. But when we really look at our superpowers, what you're really doing is I lead the data collection process. That's an action. For the $5 million department, that's a group of people, so that our team can have the information they need to do their jobs and help our customers. It's a bigger result. Think about what you do. Think about some of the things that you do that make an impact. Follow it up the chain. Maybe you only think that you're making one thing move forward, but if it wasn't for that thing, what's the next piece in the puzzle? The who and do what statement is a great way, it's a great exercise for you to take on, especially right now, especially in a time when you are getting ready for performance reviews. How do you talk about what you do, what you've done, how you serve in a way that makes someone look up and say, oh, yeah. Oh, Now I remember why that job's important. Now I remember why we wanted Sophia in that role. Now I remember why we needed Indy in that role. Try your who and do what statement. This is an experiment. You're not going to be perfect right off the bat. Play with it. And if you want to pop in some ideas to the chat or some things that come to mind, please do. There's no right or wrong. We're all in a learning space here. You know, when we're trying these things out, it is an experiment and it's going to feel uncomfortable. But here's a secret. Discomfort is where the growth comes from. So make yourself uncomfortable. Try the who and do what statement. So I want to keep moving forward so we have some more time for questions. And the second strategy is one that will probably surprise a lot of people. But if we want to communicate our value, we need to master the art of bragging. Yeah, I said it. I said bragging. Who here was taught that they should never brag? Raise your virtual hand. You know, tell us in the chat. Were you taught that brag was a 4-letter word? Yeah, I see a couple hands. I see a couple people say yes in the chat. Well, the truth is, as the baseball player Dizzy Dean said, it ain't bragging if it's true. So, what's true about you? Too often, we think that bragging means we're going to come off as being full of ourselves. We're going to be, you know, our head's going to be inflated. Everybody's going to think we're cocky. Everybody thinks that, you know, we just think we're perfect. But the truth is that there is a way to brag so that others don't gag. So I'm going to show you the formula for that. When you unlock this formula, you unlock all sorts of ways to be able to share the things that you're doing in a way that other people aren't going to shy away from, but they're going to lean in and say, wow, tell me more. And it starts with finding your point of pride. And what do I mean by a point of pride? There's something that you've done. And for the sake of this exercise today, let's just think about this past year, 2020. There's something that you've done. There's a choice you've made, a way you've been, a project you've led. Find that point of pride, write it down. And often we get caught up that we think our point of pride has to be what I call a ta-da moment. You know how like the gymnasts at the end, they go ta-da, even if they fall? Well, your point of pride doesn't have to be anything that's ta-da, because so often it may be something that no one's ever even seen. It might be an error we caught before it got down the line. It might be a tough conversation we had with a fellow coworker that helped them get through a tough time, or that diffused conflict, or that maybe created conflict that needed to happen. Maybe you needed to put it on the table. Pick a point of pride for you in this past year. And what I want you also to think about is that that point of pride is something in your superpower space. So I know you've done a lot of things this year. Let's find one right now, one that comes to mind that shows you in the way you want to be seen, that's you at your best and highest use. So, because a lot of us can do a lot of different things. Like for me, for example, you know, I'm pretty good with different back-end technology and systems. But just because I can doesn't mean I should. That is not my superpower space. My superpower space is doing this. My superpower space is creating ideas, coaching, and connecting with people. So pick that pride point that fits in your superpower space. Because if you're starting to brag and tell stories about things that you really don't want to keep doing, what's going to happen? Any guesses? Yeah, you keep getting those opportunities. So talking about the things that you want more of, talking about the ways you've done things that you would like to see happen again and again, is how to brag in a way that stays in your superpower space. And then here is the other secret to mastering the art of bragging. So we're going to add emotion to it. Because the truth is that emotion puts people in motion. Positive emotion pulls people forward. Negative emotion makes people stand back. There's a way to add emotion that's your emotion, that's honest and authentic to you, that's not fake, that's not trying to be something that you're not. And here's how. With your pride point, add an emotion statement. I call these smoothers. So listen to the difference. I might say, I'll be speaking today to the Mondelēz IBS Women's Network. Or I might say, I was so proud to be invited to speak today to the Mondelēz Women's Network. There's a distinction. You know, one is that feeling of it's bragging, it's like feeling arrogant, it's like you're telling people something. The other is your experience. I was excited when I got to reconnect with Katie. I appreciated having the opportunity for all of you to be here and participate and chime in the chat. So what about for you? Think about something that it's the pride point for you. How would you put emotion to it? The feeling that you get for it, the way that it makes people lean forward. And you can do this with friends, with teams too. When I would do this in a group where we might break out into breakouts, or, you know, in the old days when we did things in person, every single person usually said, no one wants to hear me brag. No one wants to hear my stories. And you know what? After just a few minutes of experimenting with this, what do people say? I wanted to hear more. She was excited by that thing, and that got me excited too. That was really cool to hear what she had done, what she was proud of, what she was recognized for. Don't underestimate the fact that people want to hear your stories. And if you're not telling them, you're not telling us, how will we know? So, how about for you? Write it on your worksheet or pop it here in the chat. But what's one thing that you could brag on right now? What's one thing that makes you feel proud? One thing you did, maybe something you didn't do, you chose not to do in this past year. Something that fits in your superpower space. I know there's something for you. Brag is not a four-letter word. When you put emotion to it, when you are telling your stories because you want to share that story with other people, you show them how you can bring your superpowers to work. And it helps other people make you stand out. It helps you not to become a commodity, because now people have an idea of what it is that you do at your very best. Okay, we'll have the third point, then we'll stop and we'll take some questions. So put your questions in the chat, or thanks for the comments that are coming through. I say, is proud to turn contentious relationships between the team, right? I mean, we've all had to negotiate lots of different types of communications and different team situations this year, right? Give yourself some credit for that. But the third strategy to communicate your value and to be valued, be more valuable, is to stop doing the busy work. Now, what do I mean by the busy work? Many of you know the busy work is the things, and especially as women, we often get defaulted to what I think the term someone had used was the workplace housekeeping. So that might be organizing the meeting, or that might be writing notes, or that might be, in a physical environment, going to pick up the birthday cake. These are things that need to be done. But if you're not the professional administrative assistant, who I have high respect for, and those are great projects for an administrative assistant, if you are doing things just because others won't, that are not in your superpower space, you are not adding to your brand. You are not really being helpful, because what you're doing is others are seeing those things that you're doing and not seeing the things where you matter, the things where you make a difference. So yes, slicing and serving. And when you slice and serve the cake, you end up cleaning up. Just say no. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Change, the kind of change we're all going through now, is a perfect time for a reset on any kind of busy work that might be happening for you. And it may be something about a relationship, how you're connecting with somebody, but it could be a process or a system. It could be deliverables or some boundaries. It might just be simply someone else's expectation, or could be your own expectation. This is the perfect time to identify those things that are outside of your superpower space, and especially the ones that feel draining, that feel exhausting, the ones that feel like they are not contributing to who you really are when you've got that red cape on and you are soaring through your work and your world. You can hit reset. Here's how. You now have these magic words. And you know how anytime something's changing, we all are reflecting right now. We're all thinking about where we go next, where we've been. So you can use words with whoever might have a stake in you changing. Something like, all this changes made me think about X, the thing you want to change. All this changes made me think about the way that we're doing the weekly reports. So I'd like to talk to you about moving from doing them weekly to doing them monthly, or doing them weekly to doing a 5-minute audio that anybody can tap into anytime to get the latest data. Think about what that's for you. Starting the conversation is so powerful. If you need to reset a relationship, hey, I've been, all this change has made me think about how we're really getting along, connecting. And I'd really like to talk about going from where we don't quite always know what's important to each other to figuring out a way that we can stay in better touch. There's so many ways that we can use this, but this is the way that we can hit reset, that we can stop doing the busy work, and ultimately we can teach people how to treat us. Because when we think the work will speak for itself, when we default to those myths, people make up their own stories. And you make it look too easy. Even your boss likely doesn't fully understand all of the things that you do and all of the parts that you do. We can teach people how to treat us. Ultimately, clarity, when we know who we are in our superpower space, when we are able to talk about it, when we're able to brag, we're able to tell those pride stories, to show people, demonstrate to people, like, this is the way to use me, this is the way I contribute. It creates more time and it creates more focus. And I don't know about you, who doesn't want more time and focus? So how about you? Is there one thing that's popping to mind right now that you could reset? Relationship, a process. I have a client right now who was talking about some of the things on her plate that just were wearing her down. And one of them was this big weekly complex PowerPoint that she's responsible for. And as we started to look under the hood, I said, well, so you're spending several hours a week doing this. What would happen if it wasn't there? Would anybody care? Would anybody notice? And it got her thinking about, where have I set expectations about how something should be done? And that maybe instead of the several hours, maybe there's a half hour, 1-page summary, or again, a quick video or an audio that gives the information, that gets rid of some of the busy work, that some of which I might have been creating myself. So let's take a quick pause. Let's put Katie's video and sound back on. And Katie, let's go and let's see if we have questions or other comments that come up before we go to one last story and wrap up. So Katie, are you out there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah. Great. Just scanning for some questions.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we can start talking through them.
So great.
Otherwise, one question that I saw come up here was that, when you talked about bragging at work, there was one comment that said it's a challenge because work isn't emotional. Can you kind of comment on your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So we have all been taught, there's no crying in fill in your industry here, or it's not personal, it's just work. To which I say, I have a 4-letter word, but I'm not going to use it because this is not true. Work is human. You are human. You are real. You are not virtual. Human beings are messy. And by messy, I mean that we are driven by emotions, and not necessarily in a negative way, right? Love is a positive emotion. Caring, connection, things that you are probably demonstrating every single day in your life at work. And when we recognize that every decision is being made by emotion, not by fact. This is actually the brain's little trick. The brain tries to tell us that we're making a decision based on fact, when actually it's how we feel. It's the emotion. That's the first trigger. And there's actually some really interesting neuroscience about this. For anybody that wants to go deeper, just ping me and let me know. I'm happy to share more. But so work is always emotional. And quite frankly, who wants to work in a workplace that doesn't have good, healthy, positive emotions, care and joy and excitement and pride and energy? Just because we load this word emotion, thinking that it's all stress and gloom and doom. All of our positive emotion is what pulls people in. Excitement is what, clients want. It's what your leaders are trying to show. And, have you ever been swayed just by a fact? The same person can say the same fact, and one person you're going to believe and one person you're not. This is how we're built as humans. So if you're somebody who's a little skeptical at putting more emotion into your story, and again, the emotion isn't, big dramatic emotion. It could be as simple as, I was excited to, I was proud that, I was honored to. Nobody can argue with your emotion, how you genuinely feel. And it absolutely has a place in the workplace. It already exists. So we may as well leverage it. But great question and follow-up, Katie.
Yeah. So Darcy, one more question I have is, aside from, let's say, your performance reviews that we're going through now, do you have any guidance as to people who may not be, maybe they're not used to reaching out to people to have these conversations, but how do you network to communicate that value? Do you have any tips there?
Yes. So this is one of the things that is great when you have kind of your bragging stories. And again, they're not elevator speeches. They don't mean to be forced. You have to get comfortable with them first and to know, what are you proud of? But in every interaction with people, we have white space. We have the time before a meeting, the video meeting, where everybody's logging on, or you know, in a all remote world, we can be more intentional about saying, hey, Sandy, we used to see each other. Oh, Siri just thought I was said her name. Sorry. We used to see each other, you know, in the hallway, but, you know, I don't get the chance to interact with you anymore. You know, are you open for a 15-minute call just to catch up? And in a catch-up call like that, or in kind of the loose time in a meeting, people will often say, how are you? And your answer typically is, fine, how are you? But instead of fine, you can say, you know, how are you? Great, I'm so proud that we just launched the new technology on time and on budget. What's going on with you? Suddenly you have what we old timers call a conversation. But you've gotten the chance in that little snippet of white space to not make a big deal about it, but to start sharing with others the things that make you special and unique and that you're working on and you're focused on. So think about using it and applying it like that. And if you have some target people that you know think of you as a commodity or think of you in one way, this is a great time to reach out to them for connection and catch up. Hey, so-and-so, I realize I hadn't talked to you for a long time. Are you open for a 15-minute catch up? We've got the holidays coming too. People, you know, people are open to you showing your care. How are you? What's going on? Tell me, and invite people to share their success story. Hey, I just was on a webinar. We were talking about, you know, the things that have gone well this year and even looking at what we really did do this year. I'm curious for you. What's one thing that you're proud of from this year? Sometimes we need to go first. Great questions. So, and again, on the page, the Mondelēz page, and Deb will share that link again with you. And I know Katie sent that around too. There's a place if you want to ask deeper questions, and in our follow-up session, we're going to get a chance to go purely into more of those. So
yes, and I know I've already visited the Mondelēz page that you created for us, and there are so many great resources there to really get you thinking and putting things into action.
Great. Great, good. I'm glad that's valuable. So as we wrap up, we want to be respectful of the time. I know we got a little bit of a late start, but we'll still end on time. What is the action that you need to take? Do you need to incorporate this into your self-performance review, or as you encourage your team and coach your team about what they need to put in there, to not hold back, to really find those points of pride? What's the action they need to take? And again, as I mentioned, we'll be back together in December. So, and your question can be confidential. So if there's something that you didn't want to share in the chat, or that, you know, you like don't want someone else knowing what's coming from you, go ahead and do that. And one quick story to wrap us up. Jeff Bezos tells this story, and you may, unless you've been off planet, remember that Jeff Bezos is the CEO of Amazon. And he had a friend that wanted to do a perfect freestanding headstand. And she was in good shape. She thought it would be easy. She watched a couple videos. It sounded so easy. It wasn't easy. She over and over, she tried and tried. And she almost was going to give up. She's like, this isn't for me. This just doesn't feel like me. I don't think I can do this. Until a friend said this to her. If you think you're going to figure it out quickly, you're just going to end up quitting. And I feel like the same goes for these strategies, for the idea of communicating your value, the idea of breaking out of the commodity trap and standing up for who you are, what you're proud of, how you serve, because it's not just about you and your business. It's not just about your career. Now more than ever, the world needs what you bring every single day. I'm so honored to be here with you today. Thank you all who've joined us. Thanks to Katie and everybody who found your way in. And of course, if you have a friend who's on this list who is either signed up for the next one or wasn't so sure, you know, we've got the follow-up scheduled in December, and we've also got this same presentation next week for others in different time zones. So Kate, I'm going to hand it back to you as we wrap up.
Yes, thank you so much, Darcy. I know I leave this session so energized and really motivated to continue to share my value with others. And it's really got me thinking on other ways that I communicate my value as well. So a couple of housekeeping items is that our next session, so we have the session November 10th, which will be a continuation of this, similar topics of the contents will be the same for other time zones.
You can come again if you want. So it's the same,
Exactly.
same conversation.
Feel free, because there could be other questions or other insights that you get. And, you know, maybe even going through it twice is going to be beneficial to you, just so it sinks in there. Then also December 8th, we have a Q&A session. So after you've kind of absorbed some of this and put some of these thoughts into action, it would be great for us to come together again and go through some Q&A, you know, go through the site that Darcy referenced here, the redcaperevolution.com/MDLZ, and look at some of those resources and how do we really make the most of this time that we have and this investment that we have in ourselves to add more value and just progress ourselves throughout our careers. So we look forward to seeing you on the 8th. And then also, Sophia Aragon's going to be sending out a survey coming up about just, you know, how the session went, and there's some text boxes around, you know, your comments. If you want to ask questions there, I could also pass them on to Darcy, as well as any feedback you have on opportunities for how we can make improvements as well. So thanks again for your time and participation and investment, and keep showing your value.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, Darcy.
Bye.